Thank you. I would like to welcome you to the webinar Equal Pay for Women, Tools and Policies. The webinar is organized by the Czech Republic, by the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs, and it is part of the 65th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. My name is Martina Štěpánková, and I am a Deputy Minister for European Funds and International Cooperation at the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs of the Czech Republic. And first, I would like to welcome and give the floor to Miss Jana Maláčová, for her opening remarks. Jana Maláčová is the Minister of Labour and Social Affairs of the Czech Republic, and she's also head of the Czech Republic delegation at the 65th session of the Commission for the Status of Women. So, Minister, the floor is yours for the opening remarks.
So, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to the discussion organized by the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs of the Czech Republic. It is a pleasure that we can see many faces we know from the previous years. I thank the United Nations for this opportunity to hold this side event during the 65th Commission of for the Status of Women session. Of course, it would be better to discuss and share our ideas in person in New York. Nevertheless, I'm glad that in these difficult times we could meet at least virtually. Why did we choose equal pay for women, tools and policies as a topic for this event? For the Czech Republic, it is a personal issue. The gender pay gap in the Czech Republic is quite high. Over 18% is one of the highest in the Europe at all. The gender pay gap in the Czech Republic remains through all our efforts still very high. We make the effort to reduce it and let the women feel that they are valued the same as men. We promote the public debate on gender pay gap in the Czech Republic and contribute to finding solutions. International cooperation is a very important part of our effort to eliminate the gender pay gap. Working with the Equal Pay International Coalition will allow us to learn and benefit from the best practices from other countries. As a member state of the European Union, the Czech Republic very closely follows the work of the European Commission, especially in the field of pay transparency. Outside the EU, we draw inspiration from Switzerland and Iceland. It is my pleasure to welcome all the speakers and thank them for accepting our invitation. Among them, there are representatives of the countries and institutions that I have just mentioned. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, the past year has been especially hard on women. Women from majority of nurses and people caring for the most vulnerable in social service facilities. Many women have experienced a drop in their income due to losing a job or homeschooling their children. It was also very hard. As a result of the COVID-19 crisis, the gender pay gap may widen again even more. For this reason, I think that sharing ideas and experience between nations may bring us new tools and policies to prevent such a setback. It is my hope that this discussion will contribute to these efforts. I thank you for your attention, and I really look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your words. And now I would like to introduce you our speakers.
And geographic designing and thought about.
Excuse me, everyone, please mute your microphone. First, I'd like to introduce Professor Marie-Thérèse Shisha from the University of Montreal. Professor Shisha is the audit by employers and will be talking about its implementation. Second, I have the pleasure to welcome Ms. Sylvia Dürer, Director of the Federal Office for Gender Equality of Switzerland. Switzerland is famous for developing the Logip tool, which allows employers to analyze gender pay gap in their companies. And Ms. Dürer will talk about the experience using the Logip tool. Third, let me introduce Trygve Hallgrimsson, a special advisor with the Directorate of Equality in Iceland. Mr. Trygve Hallgrimsson will be talking about the Icelandic equal pay standard as a base for certification of equal wage. We have also invited a representative of the European Commission. It is Ms. Lesia Radelitsky, member of Cabinet of the Commissioner for Equality. In her presentation, she will cover the EU approach to gender equality with an emphasis on gender pay gap and pay transparency. For the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs of the Czech Republic, we have my colleague Ms. Lenka Simerska, who is the head of our gender pay gap elimination portfolio. She will speak about the uniqueness of the complex approach being realized at the ministry, and she will mention the policies and tools adapted from other countries, that what works well and what is missing. Our last speaker, we have Dr. Sharifa Noaman Al-Emadi from Doha International Family Institute, who will briefly summarize the state of gender pay gap in Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us at our webinar today, and we also welcome all other participants, and we also welcome there in the discussion, and I hope they will ask many questions to our participants. Technically, for the questions or your comments, please use our chat. You can address one of the panelists or you can address all of them. Please name those you ask. And as a moderator, I will read your question and there will be no voice interventions during the webinar. So please use chat as much as you can to raise your question or issue during the webinar. And please kindly state your name and institution you represent, for us to know whom you represent. The questions will be answered by our panelists at the end of the webinar. And now, because we have many guests, many panelists, so now I would like to give the floor to Professor Marie-Thérèse Shisha for her presentation, who will speak about the experience of implementation of the gender-neutral remuneration audit by employers, how long the process takes, and also if there is experience of implementing the policy within public institutions. So, dear Professor Shisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, I say good morning because it's early in Canada, and thank you very much for the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs to have invited me. I will speak about a guide that I have developed for the ILO. I'm not working with the ILO. I'm professor at the University of Montreal, but I am expert in pay equity and other questions about equality with the ILO. I don't know where is my is it possible to have the slides? Can you see the slides? Because I can't see them.
No, we can't see them. So,
I'm sorry, I'm working on it.
okay. So my colleague.
Okay, I will start without the slides.
Okay.
In fact, I'm in Quebec, which is a French-speaking province of Canada, and Quebec has since 1995 a pay equity proactive legislation, which make it mandatory for all employers with 10 employees or more to make a pay equity plan and to apply it. So this is something that we're going to have the 25th anniversary this year. And one of the features of this pay equity legislation is that there is a pay equity committee composed of employer representatives and employee representatives. And this pay equity committee will do all the process of evaluating the jobs, calculating the difference in pay, and implementing the pay equity results. So this is a feature I wanted to underline. Now, if I start with what I'm going to speak about, as I mentioned, is the gender-neutral job evaluation. We have to see that job evaluation is at the cornerstone of pay equity, because if we define pay equity as equal work for equal wage for work of equal value, we see that value is at the center of the implementation of pay equity. So how do we evaluate this dimension? Something that's important is that, as I mentioned, we have to have a gender-neutral pay equity job evaluation system. And what does it mean? What do we mean by gender-neutral? Gender-neutral means that it will take into account the features of women's jobs in the same way as it takes into account the features of male-dominated jobs. Because if you look at traditional job evaluation methods, they were tailored to men-dominated jobs. And so many aspects of women's dominated jobs were invisible. And as they were invisible, they were not evaluated. And as they were not evaluated, they were not paid consequently. So something very important is to reevaluate women's jobs and men's jobs with a new tool, which is gender neutral. So what are the evaluation factors? Usually everywhere when we talk about job evaluation method, we have four factors, which are qualifications, responsibility, efforts, and the conditions under which the work is performed. So these four factors are those which are necessary to evaluate the jobs. Now, the factors, of course, should be broken in sub-factors, because responsibility or qualifications are not the same in a, for instance, IT enterprise as in a mining enterprise or a hospital or something like that. So we have to define sub-factors for each of the four factors that I mentioned. For instance, the effort factors is not only physical factors, but we have to take into account mental effort and emotional effort, depending, of course, of the enterprise, of the workplace that's where we apply the job evaluation method. Now, predominantly women's jobs often involve different requirements from those of predominantly male jobs. And So it is very important to be vigilant when selecting the method and to ensure that its content is equally tailored to both women's and men's jobs. Okay, so okay. We cannot make them larger. Is it possible to make the full screen? Yeah, this is better. Okay. I have to go to number 8. Okay, thank you. So now why women's jobs are undervalued? It's because, as you know, there are many prejudices and stereotypes regarding each of the factors. For instance, if we look at qualifications, many for women's dominated job, often we think that interpersonal skills, communication skills are fine, manual dexterity, which is required for some jobs, are innate. And if they are innate, they're not the result of training. There is no merit in having them. And then if there are personal qualities rather than job qualification, we don't have to pay for them. And this has to be deconstructed, because in when we talk about pay equity, it is essential to include all of the qualifications that are required for the job being evaluated, regardless of how these qualifications were acquired, whether innate or acquired. This is not pertinent if it's required by the jobs, because we pay for the job requirements and not for the characteristics of people who are doing the jobs. Now, if we take, for instance, excuse me, but I don't know why it doesn't. Anyway, I will continue without for instance, I can say, for instance, that
if you need another screen, so my colleague can change the picture. So just because you.
The next
okay,
one.
The next slide, please.
Yes. Okay, thank you. On the same level, I can say that nursing requires, we know that nursing requires a great deal of empathy, know-how, and patience. And whether this skill is innate or acquired is not relevant for job evaluation. So we have to keep this in mind, to have a gender-neutral GEM, which is the short way of saying job evaluation method. Now, if we go to the next one, which talks about where I'm talking about efforts. Often efforts in job evaluation methods, traditional ones, are considered mainly as physical efforts, and physical effort in the context of construction work or blue collar work. So this will not consider, they will ignore, as I mentioned, will make it invisible, the physical efforts made in women's jobs. And what are these physical efforts in women's jobs? As you can see, a secretary job involves many types of physical effort that we forget, we don't see, we ignore, in fact. And early childhood educators also involves a lot of effort, lifting young children, which are often sometimes agitated, who resist being lifted, or also having other physical efforts that are done. Now, and I can go on, and for instance, if we take the next one about responsibility, which I said is the third factor, and the responsibility is often associated with a hierarchical level, how many people you have under your direction. We know that because of the glass ceiling that women face, often they don't have a high level of hierarchical level. So often we will say, well, there are no important responsibility in women's work, but if we look at the different aspects of the responsibility, we can see that women, often managers, for instance, of human resources, have a significant responsibility with regard to the productivity of employees, which will affect, of course, the profitability of the enterprise. So we have to take this type of responsibility to consideration. Can we go to 13, please? Thank you. Now, if we look at the conditions under which the work is performed, which is the fourth factor, often also it's associated to construction work, blue-collar work, where there is a lot of noise, there is dust, there are dangers, risk of accidents, etc. But if you look at women's jobs, we can see that there are many unpleasant or difficult conditions under which they perform their work. For instance, can we go to the next? For instance, supermarket cashiers are exposed to continuous noise and the potentially harmful race of scanners. Nurses are exposed to contagious diseases. Early childhood educators exposure to a very high noise level made by children, toys, etc. And they are exposed to contagious diseases. So all those conditions under which women's work is performed are often ignored. And that's why I come back to the initial idea that we have to make women's work visible. And this is the goal of a gender-neutral job evaluation method, to make it visible as much as men's work. And now if we go to the next, what are some benefits of gender-neutral job evaluation method? Of course, there is the main benefit for women who will have a higher pay, which is equal to a male job of same value. And other impacts on women is that it restores the dignity of their work, because when your work is recognized, you feel much more satisfied than when many aspects are ignored and not paid. And also it allows to take into consideration technical aspects of women's work, and not often, but sometimes we have realized that once the technical aspects of women's work are made visible, they are sometimes allowed to take some training in the workplace and move to other types of jobs that are more technical, and that people thought at first that women didn't have the qualification to do them. So this is one. But one of the main major benefits for employers, and they often told me that, is the fact that they will obtain a compensation system which is based on the new value of jobs that is consistent and tailored to their needs. So this benefit, really many employers have underlined it. And another positive impact is the enhanced attractiveness of the enterprise, because now we know that young workers look at the equity, the ethical aspects of enterprises, and they compare before choosing in which one they're going to work, especially when there is a shortage of work, as it was before the pandemic, and I hope that this will come back after. And Also, they don't have to worry about being sued for wage discrimination, which sometimes could be very costly. So these are the main benefits, but there are other. If you want to ask questions, I will be very pleased to answer to your question. Can we go to the next, please? Well, the next is just. I thank you for your attention, and of course, I have just presented a few aspects of this guide, which is can be it's free to consult on the ILO site. And if you have questions later, this is my address. You can write. I will be pleased to answer to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you to Canada. And as I already mentioned, if you have any question, you can use our chat already, and we will collect all questions, and our panelists will answer them. Panelists will answer them at the end of our webinar. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Sylvia Dürer from Switzerland, who will speak about the tool Logip that was developed and used in Switzerland and about their experience. So, and as my colleague told me, you should be able to share your presentation. No, it's not possible. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Maybe you're...
Okay, now it's okay. Thank you. It was unmuted. Thank you very much, madam. I don't have any slides, that's why.
Okay,
So thank you very much. So, Madam Minister, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Czech Republic for the invitation to discuss a major issue, and I'm very much looking forward to exchange with representatives of other countries, international organizations, and academia. For the Swiss government, closing the gender pay gap is clearly a priority. Indeed, for 2018, the average pay gap between women and men still amounts to 19%. 1 year ago, Europe was hardly, and it is still hardly hit by the COVID-19 crisis, and no one can ignore that women have been disproportionately impacted in the short-term economic fallout and probably in the long term. Therefore, tackling the gender pay gap has become an even more pressing issue. To achieve equal pay between women and men, we have developed different tools and policies in Switzerland. First, to facilitate the involvement and commitment of companies, we need to assist them in analyzing their pay practice by providing them with the adequate tools and guides, as it was mentioned. The Swiss government has thus developed a web tool for employers, whether private or public, named Logip. This web tool, Logip, is reliable. It was already mentioned how important that we have very strong, solid information. It is reliable, anonymous, free of charge, and easy to use. It is available for all employers in English, French, German, and Italian. This tool makes it possible for companies within a few hours or a few days to determine whether pay differences exist between women and men with comparable individual and job-related characteristics, and whether this implies systematic gender-specific pay discrimination. It means that with this tool, we compare to a certain extent jobs and persons of equal value, as it was mentioned by Professor Chicha. In the next weeks, Logip will also feed the small companies, which is Logip will also feed the small companies, which is especially relevant in Switzerland, where 95% of our businesses have less than 50 employees. A lot of companies in Switzerland, as well as in other countries, use this tool today. However, since it is totally anonymous, We don't know who these companies are and how many they are. Though some have given testimonials about their experience with Logip, such as the audit firm PwC, for instance, or the beverage company Switzerland Coca-Cola. According to an anonymous survey, half of all employers that have conducted an analysis using Logip subsequently adapted their wages to ensure pay equality among their employees, which mainly benefited women. We will find more information on our website. Then there is the role of the public sector. Switzerland strongly believes that the public sector has to set an example in advancing gender equality at work. This is why the Swiss government launched a national charter for equal pay in the public sector in 2016. By signing the charter, the public authorities at every state level commit to eliminate pay inequality, be it as an employer, a contractor, or in case of awarding subsidies. Cities such as Geneva, Basel, or Zurich, for instance, are active members of this charter. The principle of equal pay is also embedded in our Federal Act on Public Procurement. It means that the state awards contracts only to companies guaranteeing compliance with equal pay for women and men. The same situation prevails for local authorities. On one hand, companies can use our tool Logip to make sure that they comply with the law. And on the other hand, authorities use Logip to check whether companies which obtained a contract respect the law in fact. Recently, our parliament decided to make a step further. Indeed, our statistics, I have mentioned it further, and studies show that the problem remains a serious challenge. That's why, since July 2020, all employers with at least 100 employees are obliged to regularly analyze their equal pay practice, to have the analysis audited by an independent third party, and to inform their employees and shareholders about the results. And then there we address the issue of pay transparency. Moreover, the state must provide employers with a reliable, easy to use and free tool. In our case, it is Logip, and so that employers don't have any excuse not to do an analysis. They have everything to help them to do a sound analysis. Let me now emphasize another point, the importance of good data collection and analysis. This is true for companies which often lack sound and comprehensive data, but also for government, which must develop a strong set of gender statistics for evidence-based policy making. The importance of gender statistics will be a main topic in the next UN World Data Forum, which will be hosted by Switzerland in autumn 2021. You are all invited to join this global conference as well as the Global Forum on Gender Statistics, which will be held back to back. As already mentioned, the gender pay gap is a universal problem. Switzerland is convinced that it is only through a strong political will and managerial will, but also through sharing of experiences across countries, through social dialogue and collaboration between different stakeholders from the public and private sectors, that pay equality can be achieved. That's why I invite all of you to join Switzerland, as well as Iceland or Canada, among other countries. I invite you to join us in the Equal Pay International Coalition, the EPIC Coalition, a coalition launched by ILO, OECD, and UN Women. Our tool, Lordship, was recognized by the secretariat of this coalition, by ILO, OECD, and UN Women, as a good practice. Let me now finish with a word for all our delegates who are currently working very hard to negotiate a strong, agreed conclusion on the issue of women's participation and decision-making in public life, as well as the elimination of violence. To facilitate negotiations and contribute to the efficiency of multilateral processes, Switzerland has developed a digital database, an application on women's rights and gender equality. With these free tools, which are available for all interested people, Logib and the Women's Human Rights app, Switzerland wants to put digitalization at the service of human rights. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a very nice ending for the future. And now I would like to invite our next panelist, Mr. Hallgrimsson, who will speak about training for employees to prepare their wage system and the certification authority to evaluate it, what kind of criteria are used, and he will speak about Icelandic experience. So the floor is yours, and if you have any presentation, you should be now able to share it with us.
Okay, thank you so much. I will not be using the presentation the whole time. Very briefly, I would like to thank the Czech colleagues. I see some names I'm familiar with. We met in February 2020 in Iceland. You came for a study visit. At the time, there was a uncertainty with regards to volcanic activity near the airport. I'm happy to tell you that the eruption has started now more than a year since. So Iceland is very preoccupied at the moment with the seismic activities of Southwest Iceland. I'm here today to tell you about the Icelandic Gender Equality Pay Standard, or Equal Pay Standard, as we call it. It is a certificate system that was developed in cooperation with the Confederation of Employees and the Confederation of Employers, together with government. I would just very briefly like to tell you how it came about before I go into some of the details of how the system works. So in 2008, it so happened that we were revising our Gender Equality Act. And in doing so, there were ideas about attributing more possibilities for intervention to the Directorate of Gender Equality. We had written into the legislation that we could go into companies and ask if they had gender equality plans, but there were some ideas that these should go a little bit further and we should be able to collect data on equal pay. However, it met considerable resistance, leading to an interim provision in the Gender Equality Act stating that the minister should ensure that we create a certification system in collaboration with the social partners being Confederation of Employees and employers. This certification system was supposed to take into consideration wage equality as well as firing and hiring, employment and dismissal. I was appointed to the board of a technical committee at Standard Iceland, which was handed the task. So I have followed the process more or less since it began. And more, I have come to the conclusion that what is possibly most interesting is how to develop a political consensus on developing such a tool, and how it is promoted equally by businesses and employees, and how possibly this can also have considerations for a lack of transparency, and I'll come into that in the very end. It was supposed to be finished by 2010, but in reality, it took us 3 years to develop the standard. The standard itself takes precedent or uses the formation of other international standards. So it uses the same methodology as developing international standard organization standards, which has clear benefits when introducing this to companies that are familiar with using standard work. This whole idea was initially developed so it would live beside legislation. It was supposed to be adopted by the companies themselves by their own will, if it's possible to say. However, in 2015, in Iceland, only some 2 or 3 years after the standard had been developed, there were a series of equal pay surveys published that said we are getting nowhere with regards to equal pay. There is complete stagnation. There is no traction. And the minister then for Equality Affairs was a former head of Business Iceland. I won't go into the long detail or the history, how this came about, but we had a minister from the business side of politics, if you will, and he was convinced now is the time, there's a window of opportunity to make this a legal requirement. And he did that. The legal requirement came into force in 2018, and since the Directorate of Equality, which is responsible for administering the Gender Equality Act, has since been responsible in a type of sideline capacity to monitor the number of companies that go through the processes. And when they deliver us reports, we give them an equal pay certificate. This equal pay certificate they can use in a type of public relation capacity, if you will, making it a little bit of a carrot for businesses to be able to proclaim that they have taken the gender equality standard. But what does it require? And I will very briefly go through some of the points. I do not have time to discuss all of them. However, the substance of the equal pay standard work is that you make an assessment about equal pay before you begin the work. There are many ways to do this. We have already from Switzerland the Logic tool. Some of them use that, for example. But as a requirement, you must make an equal pay survey. Then you make statements in an equal pay policy, and this equal pay policy can be part of an equal pay project of your equality plan. Following the logic, you do improvements after you've assessed your capacity to do so, and then you plan for further implementation. Finally, you should be able to check whether your adjustments are correct enough to warrant if you will, an interim or a first type of certificate. This doesn't mean that you have eradicated all the issues of equal pay in your your company, but you will do so, or you plan to do so within a time period. If you do that, and the auditor, which is a third party, supposedly neutral auditor, hands the Directorate of Equality a report about the process, stating that it has been truly correctly done, we allow companies and organizations, both public and private, to use a certificate of their doing so. However, there are some issues with this. We had from Marie-Therese from Canada the questions of values, and this is the core of the equal pay standard. You enumerate, or you put into numbers, the amount of value a worker has on multiple variables. Put very simply, we try to put a number on your competences, responsibility, strain, and working conditions. Competences can be, for example, education, work experience, skills, various cognitive requirements, etc., or communication skills. Responsibility being both managerial of employees, or responsibility for employees, or finances, possibly sometimes responsibility of providing services or maintaining equipment. Strain being, for example, mental strain or emotional strain, coming back to what has been discussed, with the idea of putting correct value on the strain of women in caregiving jobs, for example. So throughout the process, there is also the need to put into action some feminists' idea about how we organize work. With regard to working conditions, these can also be of various kinds I won't go into. However, what are the advantages and disadvantages of producing such a system and implementing it? It's fair to say that during the implementation process, there hasn't been a sufficient policy analysis. So I cannot tell you now whether this is all being correctly done, because we have put so much effort into the practicalities, because the infrastructure itself was only moderately sufficiently ready to do this. Because if you want accreditation as an auditor, you have to provide certificates that you have an understanding of the gendered issues that are in play. However, there are advantages, and I will say that it has brought the discussion of equal pay into the mainstream arena of companies and organizations with a different type of ethos or atmosphere, because it is seen as this part of good human resource management. It's a little bit of fashion, if you will. And I say this knowing that it is problematic also to introduce this as a management fashion. But nonetheless, it has freed, if you will, the discussion of equal pay to a degree. There are challenges, and most notably, I must tell you that it has to do with transparency. The availability of data for each employee that is subject to the evaluation. So you cannot, as an employee, ask for how your colleague was ranked in comparison to you. And this is a major defect, if you will, of this type of standard work, because some argue quite convincingly that none of the work needed to be done if only we would have had total transparency of pay. But as we do not have that, this is where we are. We are working with a tool that has received considerable positive attention by the labor market and businesses. So I will leave it as I'll leave it at that, telling you that please, if you have questions, do not hesitate to contact the Directorate of Equality in Iceland, and we will probably be able to answer some of your questions if you cannot post them in the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Helgensen. And as you mentioned, our participants can put their question in chat, and our dear panelists will answer them at the end of today's webinar. So we have now 2 questions, so the floor is yours, and you can put more and more questions. We definitely will have time to answer them. And now I would like to invite our next guest, Lesia Radelitsky from the European Commission, and I will give her floor now.
Thank you very much to the Czech Republic for inviting the European Commission, and from the cabinet of Helena Dalli, Commissioner for Equality. As this is very timely for us, we presented only a few weeks ago, in the beginning of March, the proposal for a directive on equal pay. Now, one may wonder why, because in the EU treaties from the very beginning, there is already a reference to equal pay for equal work. So since 1957, there is this reference, but still across Europe, we are at a gender pay gap at 14%. So this is why the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, from the very beginning of her mandate, made this a priority to address the issue of equal pay. So we came forward with this proposal, and the way that I would like to present it is how this affects workers, how this affects employers, and what is in there for member states. So let me start with the workers. So the first aim of our proposal is to empower workers to enforce their right to equal pay. And this happens before they start the employment, and then afterwards during employment. So what happens before employment? Their applicants will have the right to have to know the salary range offered for the position that they are applying for. That's one thing. And the other thing is that the prospective employer will not be able to ask anyone about their salary history. Now, why did we put that forward, those 2 points? Is because that allows the people applying for a job to enter into salary negotiations at an equal footing. What it also does is that you break the trend of women's lawyer pay and ensure that the systematic gender bias and undervaluation is not perpetuated. So that's for before getting into employment. What happens to the workers once they are employed? Well, no matter what the size of the company is, each worker has the right to receive information about how their pay compares with the average pay level of colleagues doing the same work or work of equal value broken down by sex. But of course, I mean that, having equal pay is not enough. So workers must also be able to enforce that right. And so to further empower workers, what this proposal for directive does is facilitating the access to justice. How? Well, because we know that workers can often be in a vulnerable position when they try to address this issue. So in order to be stronger, they will be able to either ask equality bodies or workers' representatives to act on their behalf. The other novelty with this directive is that collective claim on equal pay issues can be done. We have also included different enforcement measures on legal costs, evidence, burden of proof, and compensation, which should make it easier for workers to pursue a discrimination case. So that's for the workers. Now for the employers. What we want with this initiative is to trigger action by the employer to address the systematic undervaluation of women's work. So we will ask companies of 250 workers and plus to have an annual reporting on any average pay gap between women and men within their organization. This information will be made public and will help raise awareness about equal pay issues and encourage employers to evaluate and monitor pay structures to ensure equal pay. Now, for those companies of 250 and above that have done the reporting, and if there is a high risk of unjustified pay inequalities, employers will be requested to carry out a joint pay assessment of the situation together with the workers' representatives. This information will not be made public, but will help identify the fact that there is a pay gap, but also the reason for the pay gap and how to remedy the problem. Now, if such actions are not enough and a discrimination case ends up in court, the directive also sets out a range of remedies and penalties, such as paying compensation to the worker, including the full recovery of pay, compensation for lost opportunities, and moral prejudice. Injunction orders to take structural organizational measures, fines, or exclusion from participation in a public procurement procedure. So that's for the employers. What does it mean for member states? What we will ask member states is to ensure that they help setting up tools and methodologies to help employer assess and compare the value of work based on a set of objective criteria. And these tools and methodologies may include gender-neutral job evaluation and classification systems. Now, it will be up to the member states, so they will have a flexibility to decide how they organize this, and thus respecting the practices where social partners, for example, and collective bargaining play an important role. Member states will also be asked to appoint a monitoring body, which will help ensuring implementation, data collection, and raising awareness about equal pay. Now, this proposal has been drafted in times, unfortunately, of uncertainty and economic downturn. And while, as was mentioned before, women have been hit disproportionately hard by this crisis, we had to make sure that the proposal that we were putting forward was done in the most proportionate manner possible. So on the one side, support gender-sensitive recovery, allowing the strengthening of implementation and enforcement of the equal pay principle for all workers, but on the other side, also limiting costs and administrative burden for SMEs. So the pay transparency is the start of a process that will create a mind shift in the workplace to make gender bias and discrimination a thing of the past and create equal opportunities to attract all talent available. We are, however, very conscious that pay transparency is not enough, but it is a first and necessary step in order to assure equal pay and fight gender-based pay discrimination, and also a first step in the longer work to be done on closing the gender pay gap.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Radelitsky, for the information about the proposals of the European Commission. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague from the ministry, Elenka Simerska, who will speak about the Czech experience and Czech measures and activities done in this field.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Minister. Let me just adjust my computer a bit here. I'm gonna share my presentation with you. Can you please see the presentation now?
Yeah, it is starting to share. Yes, so just please make it larger.
Make it larger.
Yes, full screen if you can.
Okay.
Try prezentace spustit od začátku.
Děkuju.
Just small advice in Czech language.
All right, now it should be working.
Okay, so
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, dear guests, dear viewers, it is my great honor to be presenting at this CSW event. It is so special because it is the Czech Republic's actually very first event which addresses equal pay for men and women at this level. So I'm very glad about it. And as such, it is also one of the strong signs that the Czech Republic's commitment to its gender pay gap reduction is serious. International dialogue and sharing is very important for us at this moment. And in my presentation, I will show you why it is so. So let's go back for a moment to 2014. Back then, the gender pay gap in the Czech Republic was 22%. As a country, we found ourselves at the very bottom of the statistic. In comparison with the EU members, we were at the second worst position. At this situation, a very wise decision was made. It was decided that as a country, we no longer want to leave the burden on individual women and on families, and the solutions on NGOs and enlightened employers. It was decided to put in place a very complex and long enough project directly at the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs. And thus the 5 years project called 22% Towards Equality was born. We are now at its peak, 2021. We are wrapping up at the end of this year. And I would like to share what we did during the past 5 years and then discuss with you where to go next. So these are the project components. What we focused on as number one was in-depth analysis. We carry out qualitative and quantitative studies of remuneration of women and men, how the gap is being created, where it lies. And I'm not presenting the detailed findings today with you because there are many, and I think we can easily share the analysis in the online world and exchange, and we are already doing that with many of you. This is just to inform you that this was the basics of the project since its beginning. Very important component were methodologies within the ministry itself. First of all, the methodology of remuneration control. We used the structure of the State Labor Inspection Authority that was already there. and the existing section 110 of the Labor Code, which talks about same work and work of equal value. And we went into broad and deep discussion with the inspectors. As a result, there is a methodology of control of the Labor Code provision observance. Another methodology is realized as a response to the highly segregated labor market in the Czech Republic, which contributes a great deal to the national gender pay gap. It is a methodology for the Labor Office of the Czech Republic. This methodology instructs labor offices on the way of gender-neutral requalifications and job offering, as well as career assistance and consulting at schools when kids decide about their future direction and go to decide about the next education direction. All these include roles of the Czech Labor Office. Then we have tools for individuals. First of all, it is the payroll and salary calculator. It's an online tool. And here we took a great deal inspiration from Austria and developed a similar tool as they have. It is a comprehensive application. You can find out the real amount of wages and salaries for a specific selected position, and the calculator takes into account age, gender, field, and qualification, and region. And it shows the gender pay gap within each category, so women know what money they should be asking for. We also provided individual advice through an online consulting space and also through wage and salary negotiation manual. It's basic information about labor legislation for women, especially for those who are returning to the labor market after some break, especially after maternity or parental leave. And then it is tools for employers. It has already been discussed here by Mrs. Durer. It is the Logip tool. I'm sorry to Switzerland that this flag somehow turned into violet, but it's obviously the Swiss flag here to illustrate that we are taking Logip from Switzerland. Big thanks goes to Fogge and Switzerland. We test the Czech version of Fogge, of Logip, with 30 employers. We also fine-tune it according to the local legal environment, and our statisticians and HR experts have some ideas about apps, and we are ready to share these with Fogge and also with the Equal Pay International Coalition, and I'm hoping we will be doing this very soon. In cooperation, and again, this is really a build-up on international cooperation, which is very important to us. And big thanks goes to the Swiss agency. The next big chapter for us has been the social dialogue. We hold a tripartite discussion for more than 2 years at a working level, and as a result, there is a position paper which includes model provisions of collective agreement. We actually seek to support the role of social dialogue in the process of reduction the gender pay gap, as many countries do. It is not an easy task because the position of the unions and the gender topics within the unions have been weakened substantially after 1989. However, it makes a big sense since the gender pay gap is found lower even here in the Czech Republic in those companies where unions are active and social dialogue is taking place. We also educated public administration officers through e-learning and through face-to-face education in those years before COVID when it was possible. We also took comprehensive legislative analysis. We also made macroeconomic modeling and analysis. What would be the costs of various selective scenarios of gender pay gap reduction, which is very important. We just have the results very fresh. We also took public opinion research, in which we found some very interesting numbers about the Czech population and the public opinion. It says that over 80% of Czech public has actually some experience with gender-based pay discrimination or unclarity about the pay, men, women, and these topics. It also showed us that people in general are not against transparency measures, as we sometimes hear, and they think it is the role of the state to take care of closing the gender pay gap. It's actually very interesting because these findings go a bit against the rhetoric of the employers sometimes. Throughout the 5 years, and especially during the last 2 years of the project, we have been raising awareness through media, through social media, and through discussing on various platforms. It's not always easy because the issue, the level of discussion within the public space has not been very high. So it was our role to actually put more serious discussion in place to present the data, the evidence-based policy, etc. As all European Social Fund funded projects, we also run our evaluation, and also we are very active in foreign cooperation. It's a must for us. Throughout the project, we studied good practices in various countries, and actually it is because of that we are able to invite you all to this virtual table today, because we know what you are all doing and what is interesting to bring forward as a good practice. It helps us a lot. And last but not least, and actually most importantly, oh, sorry, I was talking and didn't move the presentation. Here you go. Last but not least, it is the action plan for gender pay gap reduction.
Lenka, last minute, because
all right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. This action plan is strongly linked and made accordance to the governmental strategy for gender equality, which will be valid for up until 2030, and which was adopted by the Czech government symbolically on March 8th. So where we are now, you know some of the data. I just can tell you that we are now the 5th highest. We have the 5th highest gender pay gap in the European Union. It has been some of the good results of the project, not only because as you see, my last point says that gender pay gap shrank from 22% to 18%. It was also not only because all the stuff we did, but also because of the great economic growth that we were experiencing in the past years before COVID. As a result, also the problem now is well mapped. We have tools that have been tested and are ready to use. We have stakeholders on our side. We have alliances created, and we will have the action plan at the end of this year. And the public and media discourse also have been shifted a bit. So these are the results that we are proud of. And now where to go next in the last minute. I will just conclude that from what we achieve, we still need to impact much more on employers. We have to make the tools part of their practices, of their HR, of their corporate social responsibility. At the same time, we need to persuade the public that gender pay gap is not an individual problem. It is still a persisting opinion within the public space. We need to adopt measures on the national level and also on the EU level via the directive that was already discussed here by Mrs. Radelitsky. And we also need to work internationally on these measures in cooperation with the EPIC. So I hope that this is not the last time we meet at this level, and our activities and our cooperation will be also so vital in the next years, despite on the fact that everything will be much more harder than before in the economic growth, because now we are facing all the challenges due to COVID. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Lenka. Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to our last speaker, our dear guest, Dr. Sharifa Noaman Al-Emadi from Doha International Family Institute. And as I already mentioned, she will briefly talk about the situation of gender pay gap in Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this chance to talk about our study in Doha International Family Institution related to the gender equality in social welfare in Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman. And it's very good to hear very good ideas and practice related to equal pay gap from the presenter. I will try to make it 5 minutes as it's requested, so I will not make the introduction or a big introduction, but this study is comparative analysis conducted through disc review of laws, existing social welfare policies, literature from Qatar, Oman, and Kuwait. But I will focus only in this 5 minutes in Qatar, and it's very small information. But it's very, very good to even present what is the finding and our recommendation to this study. In these countries, all we know that women have managed to achieve remarkable progress related to education and increased female labor force participation. It's good and interesting to present this number that in 2014 and 2015, we will see that male like finish their secondary and diploma, they are 39% and the female 28%, while in higher education and university graduate, female are more, which is 37 and male 29. This explains why only 36.7% of Qatari female are economically active, which include all these employees seeking work for the first time or unemployed with previous work experience. And why I'm putting these two numbers, because in our culture, maybe male, they prefer to finish the high school and then they go to the employee market, while female, they prefer to stay and finish higher education, so they will find like better position for themselves. And this is it's related to culture and how the perspective of the people here. Also, we will see that this percentage, it's remained almost same since 2008. So the situation didn't change in this. If we will, although the gap is average wages, it's shrinking. So we can see that there is like a little bit shrinking related to the pay gap, but still it exists. Especially in female, when the male or female, their main salary, it's the same exactly, but it's when we return back to the allowance, there is difference, especially in the social allowance and the housing allowance. So here we can see the difference. what's this impact the family as we focus in Doha International Family Institution and strengthening family. So this is impact family when a woman will be, she's the one who caring of the family. Some single women already, they take care of their extended family if they didn't get married. So, and we have the research shows that most of like caregiver in Qatar are women. So they economically, it's important to support their extended family. So it's very important to have equal pay for them when they do the same work. Also, we will see that some of the female that they already helping their like nuclear family, especially when we'll see some their husbands not, maybe they lose their job, especially what we saw during COVID-19, people who working in business, so they have like many problems related to that. So it was, or it is important that women take like equal pay so she can help her family. We also in this research found that even related to the training, women gets less on job training than men. And even there is lack adequate work-family balance policies. Example, no single country in the GCC has the minimum international standards by ILO of 14 weeks maternity leave, no paternity leave, no adequate flexible working arrangement. Also, although the last decades more women get leadership positions in Qatar, for example, 30%, still the norms and tradition are still limiting women to take different positions. So still we have a problem in that. For recommendation, I will go quickly to present our recommendation. Advocate for best practice such as Qatar Foundation for Education, Science and Community Development, where not only the leadership are women, but also QF adopted a set of policies to ensure better work-family balance and to reduce the gender pay gap, and even to ensure gender representation in the panel discussion. What we do as a DP, we use Qatar Foundation as a pilot for us, and we advocate all the their policies to the country and to the government. So always we use that in our research, especially for advocacy. Create national gender indicator to promote gender disaggregated data collection and analysis. Conduct research on the impact of increasing women representation in leadership position. Apply to a gender mainstreaming approach at the international level. Raise awarenesses regarding gender stereotype. Images on women and employment. This should be addressed at all levels of education and training from an early age to foster awarenesses among the students, parents, teachers, and the family as a whole. I tried to make it very small, as like requested, 5 minutes. So inshallah, everything, all this information useful for you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your experience. And now we have a few minutes left. So I'd like to give the floor to our participants who put some questions. I saw that some of our panelists have already answered some of the questions. So maybe first question is to for Professor Shisha. So does jobs evaluation method recommend the salary transparency as well? It's from Margaret, who is the participant of the UN Women UK delegation. So if the jobs evaluation method recommend the salary transparency as well? Excuse me, we cannot hear you. So
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the question. In fact, job evaluation method is a part of the whole process of pay equity. So the question of transparency is aside. What is done in Quebec in the legislation on pay equity is, as I mentioned, there is a pay equity committee, and the employer has to give to the pay equity committee, who does all the work of evaluation, adjustments, etc. He has to give all the needed information about pay to the members of the pay equity committee, so they can do their work based on acute information. And now the other thing is that once the pay equity process is done, the employer has to post in the workplace the results of the pay equity process with all the wages that have been adjusted and how much was the adjustment. So this is also a way of making the pay adjustments known to everyone. So transparency for those who have to do the work, and posting for all the workers in the place to know about the results. And I must say that, of course, when the workers are unionized, the pay is already known in collective agreements. It's not something that is hidden. So this is my answer to the question.
Okay, so thank you very much. And there's also for you another question from Educación Prenatal, and the question is: what is the impact of mother's leave during pregnancy, and what about an equal leave for the father, so that men can also pay their educational role with their child? So
the question of parental leave or mother leave. There is quite extensive maternal leave and parental leave that the father can take, which is paid first by the unemployment fund, and then it's paid also by the employer. I don't know if this answers your question, but it doesn't affect the pay equity adjustments, which have to be paid anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's one request for Ms. Dürer, if you could share a link to access the tool Logip. So maybe if you can share it in chat, the link to the website. So, and also
I made it, so I can say it: www.logib.ch. But I've written it in the chat.
Okay.
The language you want to.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And from Harry Chon, policy analyst for the U.S. Department of Labor Women's Bureau. She also shares experience that her office has updated an interactive tool to show men and women in 300 occupation, and also they recently posted a social media toolkit, so you can also find the links in our chat. And she asked, she put a question for Lenka. She would like to know more about the employer outreach and employer uptake on the e-learning.
Thank you for the question. I already typed some brief answer into the chat. The e-learning was specifically made for the public sphere employers. So there it is a question of us negotiating with the top representatives of these institutions and actually make it somehow obligatory for some of the public servants to take the e-learning. I think it's a method that is all right because it's part of their education, of their professional growth to take on more information about gender, about how discrimination happens, how to prevent it, what they can specifically do in their positions. So this was actually very successful decision to make it this way. As for the outreach to the commercial world, it has to be a bit different because there the companies are quite sensitive as for the data, as for the personal data and the wage data, and also there is a sensitivity about what the state should be saying to the private world and what is too much, what is acceptable, all these questions. So with a good outreach, we made an experience that it has to be offering, not pressuring. It has to be made as an assistance to them, for them to have easier life in the HR department, to collect data, to analyze data. We help them with the application of Logip when we bring it there, and we help them to discuss what the results are, what the findings are. It has to be very much made as an assistance, and in such approach, with such approach, they welcome it. They are welcoming. They say, yes, we found out so much about how our remuneration system is made, where the gaps are, and we are now able to make action steps towards improvement. So this would be a short answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And now we have probably the last question from our participant, Angelika Navarrete. I'm not sure if it's only for Dr. El Amadi or for everyone, but you can also help with the answer. Are any of these programs applicable to the migrant workers? So this is the question, if those tools and programs can be used for migrant workers. Question from Angelika.
Relate to the study was conducted for Oman and Kuwait and Qatar, which is the Qatari and Omani and Kuwaiti. But not related to this study, we just have a law that to limit, to increase the labor salary, so to make it like a limit to 1,000 riyal and more, and to provide many things related to health, to their food. And this is one of the law that just last week they conducted. So it's something very good for the labor that's working in Qatar. But it's not related to in our study, we focused on the Qatari and Kuwaiti and Omani. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And it was probably the last question, and just the time of our seminar runs out. So I would like to thank you very much to our panelists, Marie-Therese Shisha, Sylvia Dürer, Trygve Hallgrimsson, Lesia Radelitsky, Sharifa Noaman Al-Emadi, Lenka Semerska, and also to my colleague Victoria Mertova. You can't see her, but she helped me with all these electronic tools and organization. Thank you very much to all our participants for your questions and comments. I believe it was a very interesting webinar for all of you about very interesting and very important topic, which probably will become more important in next months and years, because the situation which we have to face now. So thank you very much. Stay well, and it was really nice to meet you and to have you here online. I hope we will meet in person probably next year, or at some other events where we have the possibility to talk face to face. It's easier, and probably it also brings more energy, but now we have to use those electronic tools. We are lucky to have them, that we are able to share our opinions, views, experiences, which are also the source of development and inspiration for all of us. So thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon, have a nice morning, day, all around the world, and I hope to see you next year, or maybe sooner at some other events. Bye. Thank you from the Czech Republic.